Hi everybody, RubenvanRoondrumchannel once again. I've got a lot of questions about the snare drum sound. And especially the snare drum sound I have. And what I try to do is to copy the snare drum sound, of course, of Mr. Steve Gadd. My snare drum needs some new drum heads, so I thought maybe we can do it together. The topic of today is how to get the Steve Gadd snare drum sound of the 80s and the 70s. But first, please like and subscribe this video and follow my channel and leave comments and share and go to my Facebook pages and my Instagram. That will be very nice. If you want to copy the snare drum sound of Steve Gadd, you can do it with every aluminium snare drum you want. The drum heads are very important and the way you tune it. But for this occasion, of course, we have also the same snare drum Steve Gadd uses in that period. That was not Yamaha. He always used this Supraphonic snare drum of Ludwig 5 and 14. This is of course one of the most recorded snares ever, they say, so this is a must-have. Ludalloy. And Ludalloy is a kind of aluminium special thing. Prepare it the same way Steve Gadd did it. And how do I know that? That's from interviews, and especially the old interviews of the modern drummer are very interesting. I think he had his first interview there in 1976, and there he tells all about his first great drum set. You see my other video about that, the fiberglass pearl drum set. But he also explaining what his snare drum sound is. And that's also one thing. I'm from Holland, Scheveningen, Den Haag, and my language barrier is a little bit, so I need a lot of editing in my videos to make the sentences right, because I made a lot of errors. I have to translate everything into Dutch in my head to English. So that's why it goes a little bit slow and the sentences are not so good. Okay, I've got some new drum heads. He used it in that time. 2 remote drum heads. And the bottom head is very special. The bottom head is really important in this sound thing. The bottom head is a Diplomat. So it's the thinnest snare drum bottom head around. And you will be surprised what the top head is. Also a Diplomat, but a fiber skin Diplomat. This fiber skin was of course to make it a little bit sound like an old Calf drum head. The same thickness as a normal Ambassador drum head, but then from fiber skin. It's a little bit old. And the important thing about the snare drum wires is that he uses the less wires the better. And that's also the opposite of nowadays. People have very wires with a lot of wires in it, 48, but he has also in the 90 and 90s, 2000s his own snare drum wire set, and then there is a gap here between the middle wires. There's a story a drum technician told, that drum technician saw that his snare drum was a little bit, the heads were old and the wiring was broken. So he changed as a surprise for Mr. Gadd. He said, "Surprise, I changed your snare drum." And Gadd was a little bit like, "Why? Please, why?" Because it sounded great. So the less wired, the more body the snare drum got. And the same thing is with the top head. I always hated to put new drum heads on my snare drum and on my whole drum, because I always try to find old Ambassador drum heads who are totally, played on, and because they are a little bit thinner, so they sounded so great. So the longer your snare drum head is on your snare drum, the better your snare drum is going to sound. There's also a story in this video Jay Graydon told me, the famous producer of the El Giro albums. He said, "Man, Gadd, can you use a new drum head on your snare drum, because this one is too old." He came there with totally a plate on old drum head where the whiteness here was completely gone. So Gadd put a new drum head on it and gave the old drum head to Jay Graydon. Got that in a frame and put it in the studio because Gadd wrote his autograph on it. And you can see it in that video. It's a very interesting story. Okay, I removed the wires And now this is the reason I had to, because this thing is so thin. So the problem I have always is the trick with the Gadd bottom head thing is that you have to tie it as high as possible to get a deep, very deep snare drum sound. And if you do that, you stretch the head. So this head is, you need the thinnest head, but you have to stretch it as big as possible. And there's always a threshold in, after a while, the head is a little bit too stretched. You want to tighten it and then bang, the drum head is broke. It's for me great to use new bottom heads because that's for me a big difference. If it's stretched, again, very tight. And I saw a very great drum trick of the snare drum geek on Instagram. A guy who has every snare drum in the world. And he has a trick that if your bottom head is too stretched out, take it off and turn it around. And then you can use it again. Man, that's a great trick. But I was a little bit too late for this one. Okay, this is the old one. Bye-bye, thank you. And now we have a fresh new one. I don't have a trick, I just listen. But the trick Steve Gadd explains at the MI video is also great. I have it also on my channel. So he tunes it first as high as possible, and then so that the drum head is really lamenting on the drum. So really high and then go back till you find the sweet spot. That's a great trick. But with this bottom head, it's always tune it as high as possible, but really careful. So I always adjust it a little, I twist it a little bit every time. You see how I do it clockwise and everything. So don't do too big things. I mean, I hear a tone, you know? So that's always a little bit my reference. Very musical. Yeah, it's music, man, a drum. It has a tone. Really get drum heads, and when you look very close to the up close video, there you can see it that he used that fiber skin head. And also on that video I post recently of the 1984 Siljan Day, you get a closer look to the snare and you see that it's a fiber skin drum head. So, and I think later on he did also a coated ambassador on it. And then later on he got his signature snare drum. So yeah, it was not always for Yamaha a thorn in the eye, I think, that he played Yamaha drums, but not the Yamaha snare. Sometimes he did. On the In Session DVD, he has a 6.5 Yamaha snare. There was a time that he played the wooden snare drum of the Recording Custom, the 5-inch. You see that on that Grover Washington concert of '81. That's also a very good sound. He used that also on the New York All Stars Dave Grusin thing in Tokyo. He had also a nice wooden snare there. But most of the time he uses this Ludwig Supra. And that's, yeah, it's a hell of a snare, man. I don't know why. But I think you can do it with every 5 aluminium, because now you have to pay a lot of money to get a 70s Supraphonic. Maybe that's a little bit too much. but you know. So I tied it a little bit now so that the lugs have a little bit, or the screws, sorry, have a little bit tension, and then I go with the duo, and I you know, I start. So this is a little bit like a jazz tuning. And then you have the big secret. Just cut it out of an old head. So the adjustment is really tight. It's now a little bit by taste. I like a little bit the low tuning. So the bottom head is very high. So because the bottom head is so high pitched, you have a lot of body in your snare. You still hear the wires a little bit. They have to be a little bit tighter, but so that's a really nice sound we have. And then it's also, of course, about technique to play it really up short. Okay, I hope you liked this video. See you next time. Like it, leave comments. Also negative comments, I don't care. Just comment, that's nice. And see you next time.